Is technology a force for equity in society? Well, to answer this question, we need to understand what equity is. Equity refers to fairness, making sure that everyone is getting what they need to succeed, although their needs differ. The society in which we live is not equitable. Not everyone gets what they need to succeed. Some people are privileged while others have been disadvantaged due to such things as historical injustices, language, disabilities, or socioeconomic status. To create a truly equitable society, all people need to be provided not with the same things, but with what they need to be put on an equal playing field. You just heard the other debate team argue that technology is a force for equity. They probably even defended this by claiming that technology promotes fairness through improved access to education, inclusion of students with disabilities, and a narrowing of the achievement gap. But this is not the case. Technology is not a force for equity in society. How can it be when, in fact, it is not promoting fairness in education for all members of society? So, what are these inequities, these examples of unfairness? Let's take a look at three of them. Example 1. Technology does not improve access to education for everyone. Not everyone has access to effective technology. It's still only found in the hands and homes of people who can afford to buy it, know how to use it, and that live somewhere where they have access to use it effectively. So only those who are already privileged are given improved access to education through technology. Many would argue that access to tech such as massive open online courses and other online platforms improve access to education, but without reliable internet access, how can one benefit from these free sources of education? But just because people don't have internet access or digital tech at home doesn't mean that they don't have access. They can just use it at school, right? Wrong. The digital divide between schools is massive. For example, according to reports examined by Audrey Waters in her blog on edtech's inequalities, in America, just 14% of low income schools have internet access that meets their current needs. But why do some schools have better access than others? Well, location, school or board policies and their implementation, and funding are just a few reasons. Not all schools have access to the same level of funding and therefore are unable to afford the same level of tech access. Consider federal schools on Saskatchewan's reserves. Drummond and Rosenbluth, referring to the fact sheet from the Chiefs Assembly on Education, suggest that federal funding does not include costs needed to support the educational components of a 21st century school system. These schools are considerably underfunded and in many areas, including funding for digital technology. So, although we would love it to, technology does not improve access to education for everyone in society. This is one way that tech is not a force for equity. Example 2. Technology does not make education inclusive for all students with disabilities. Assistive tech is great. We all know students who have or could benefit from it. It allows for students with disabilities to achieve tasks that may be inconceivable without it. But does this mean that tech makes education inclusive for all students with disabilities? No. Not all disabilities look the same, and not all struggles can be overcome through technology. Also, as suggested by Dagonia, Griffin, Hardy, Lee, Red, and Wilson, for assistive technology to benefit students to the fullest would require teachers to also be familiar and trained in the technology being used. If teachers are not prepared or trained, then the technology will not benefit the students. Additionally, in many cases, unless the technology is being created with the purpose of being an assistive technology, like text-to-speech programs, for example, accessibility for those with different needs or abilities is often an add-on or an afterthought, if it is considered at all. John Kelvy's article, The Blind Deserve Tech Support Too, looks into this. The article argues that some companies are content to focus on the perceived 95% of their customers without disabilities, so why worry about the other 5% until they have to? Once again, digital technology has the potential for making education inclusive of many students, but it does not create equity for all. And our third example, technology does not narrow the achievement gap. Having access to tech doesn't narrow the achievement gap. How the tech is used determines whether students will benefit from it. For example, home computer use has negative impacts on reading and math scores, and this impact is greater for low-income students because student computer use is more effectively monitored and channeled toward productive ends in more affluent homes. Sean Cullen's article, Computers Do Not Improve Pupil Results, argues that the socioeconomic divide between students is not narrowed by technology. Rather, it suggests that greater use of tech may even increase this divide. This thought is echoed by Waters in her blog, referring to this increased divide as a digital Matthew effect, likening it to the phenomenon where the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, but in this case, where new technologies actually extend the advantages of the already advantaged. Tech does not address the social issues that create barriers to learning. Many people assume that tech and online education can serve to magically erase systemic inequalities. Waters refers to this as techno-solutionism, the simplification of complex societal problems into apps and algorithms. But although technology can play a role in positive change and increased equity, it is not a magic solution. There are many instances in which societal problems create a barrier to learning, despite the added technology. So to recap, technology does not improve access to education for all, does not make education inclusive of all students with disabilities, and does not narrow the achievement gap. Of course, we would love to be able to say that digital technology is a magic solution for all of these issues and acts as a force for equity in our society, but it does not.